going to be looking, as I said, at general ledger, principally. We'll drill down to some transactions. We'll show how a report's constructed within Excel. We'll amend the report. We'll perhaps build a new report, and then show how we can get beyond that general ledger into other areas. And if we have time, at the back end of this, we'll show you some ways in which we can automate the delivery of information out to end users via our distribution manager piece. That's really a scheduling piece. It allows you to take something like a master pack, a monthly management account master pack, and actually distribute that out to stakeholders within the business. That may be cost center managers or whatever, but we can automatically generate that information and deliver it via email, via an Excel spreadsheet, or indeed now via a Word document out to those users, so they receive information which is preceded with data associated with their particular area of the business. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to skip out of the PowerPoint now. That's all I had to do in terms of PowerPoint, and I'm going to drift over to Excel. So here we are in Excel. A couple of things before we get into the actual meat of the application itself. You'll notice on my my menu bar here that I've got a new add-in into the Excel environment, the spreadsheet server, and we've got all of the key features of the application and functions of the application running across the top there. In terms of Office environments that we support, anything from Office 2007 and above. I'm actually running Office 2013 here, as I mentioned, but all of those earlier versions up to 2007 or back to 2007 are supportable by the product. You'll also notice that I've enabled the application here, and what that really means is that I've logged on to my underlying SAP environment. So I've gone through my SAP login screen that you typically use to get into SAP. I've keyed in my user ID and my password, and that's then allowed me access using my security profile to the underlying GL tables within SAP. So we're fully respecting that security level that's been laid out in terms of your access to the general ledger here via going through that login. But once we've made that connection, we are then live and direct against the underlying SAP environment. Okay, the report that we've got on screen here, you can see actually that I've got a whole raft of different reports within this particular workbook. I'll go through some of these just to give you a flavour of the type of thing that we can do. I'm going to concentrate on this income statement here. The look and feel and shape of this particular report that we've got on screen is entirely up to you as users of the application. This is this style of report that I've got here is really just for demonstration purposes, to give you an idea of the type of thing that you can do. But clearly your reports may be more complex or a different shape or whatever, and we can fully respect that because we're really just sitting within Excel. So as I say, this is really just to give you an idea of the type of thing that you can do. So we're logged on. And you can see within this report that we're looking at a fairly traditional income statement here. I've got some current period information on the left-hand side, some year-to-dates over on the right, and some prior year comparisons over here, again on the far right of this particular report. And what we've decided on this particular worksheet is that we're going to allow the user here to change the cost center, the period, and the year. Now again, in reality that might be different parameters for you. It might be business units, it might be profit centers, it could really be whatever you want it to be in terms of the dimensionality of your general ledger there that you want to change. We're just showing this, as I say, really to give you a flavour. So what I'll do here is I'm going to change the accounting period from 9 and just maybe put this back to 8. Little drop down that we've put into Excel here. Nothing special about that, it's just standard Excel functionality. Now when I hit the 8 here, what we're going to do is we're going to reach back to SAP, grab that data and bring it back to the surface of the sheet. And you can see hopefully there, if you just had your eyes on these numbers here, that they've now changed and they're reflecting the year-to-date actual for August as opposed to September. So let me just put that back. You'll see those numbers flicker into life again. So here's the key to the application really, a real-time connection back to the underlying SAP general ledger tables, retrieving that information directly into the spreadsheet. And I'll explain in a moment or two how we actually get these numbers here. In other words, how do we know that the sales revenue number is 12.6 million? What do we need to provide with the Excel sheet to retrieve that number? We'll look at that in a moment or two. But first of all, let me just show you some of the analytical capabilities that we've got with the application, aside from bringing this information down onto the surface of Excel in this way. So let's say, for example, that I want to look at the sales revenue number. My year-to-date value here may be, it may be fine. It may look a little bit high or a little bit low. It really depends, you know, on our view of the world. But whatever it is, maybe I just want to analyze and understand that number in a little bit more detail. So what I can do here is I can highlight this value. I can come to this drill, which is on my ribbon here, and I can fire off a query back to SAP, and it will generate this grid for me. And this will break down that value into its constituent parts. And what it's doing here is it's breaking down to the actual movements in the year, in this case, the year-to-date balance, for the accounts that made up that particular value of 12.6, that summary value of 12.6 million there. And you can see that we're looking at the chart of accounts INT in this case. I'm looking at a couple of different companies across a range of accounts and across a range of different business areas. So that's the first level of drill down that's automatically available to me. It's showing me what makes up that number. Now from there, I could say, well, okay, maybe I'm a bit surprised at this 2.9 million for business area 1000. Perhaps I want to investigate that a little bit further. So I can highlight that line, and I can right-click and then run a journal list for that particular selected account or row. In fact, I could do it for all of the rows in the grid, but I'm just going to choose that one for now. And this will then take me down to the transactions. So our first level of drill down is the balances here, and our second level now will be down to the transactions that make that up. I'm just going to go across to just double check my login there. And I then get this second grid. You can see we're tabbing across, creating tabs for where we're going here, so we can see we can move backwards and forwards. And I can now see, hopefully you can see on your screens there, the breakdown of that 2.9 million, which we were looking at, into the actual transactions that make that up. And you can see all of the different data that we're going from there. So both of these drill downs are, again, for want of a better expression, they're out of the box. These are delivered as part and parcel of the application, so you will always get this when the application is installed. That's not to say, however, that that's the end of the story in terms of our drill down capability. Because we have that option which I mentioned earlier on one of the slides, we have what we call a platinum version. There is the ability to build additional queries into the application and expose those to the end user so that they can maybe drill down further than these standard levels that we've shown here. So for example, I might say, well, let's have a look at this row here, and what I actually want to do is go to my SAP queries and maybe look at the FI document accounting lines that make up that particular transaction. In other words, the other side of the transaction in this case. So I can fire off that query. This is a query that's been built in the Platinum version that's now available to me as a user. So I can now immediately see the transactions that we were looking at that were associated with that journal, or the other sides of the transaction, I should say, that were associated with that journal, so the batch. And from there, I can then say, well, okay, there's a customer number associated with this first line. Maybe I want to start to have a look at that. So from here, go to my subqueries, and I now might want to choose the customer master data. So I don't really know who this customer is based on that code, but what I want to do is run a query which will tell me that. So I'm going to run that, and it now says, well, okay, that customer was Hall Manufacturing, and I can now see that information from here. So we're actually now moving from the general ledger environment into actually my accounts receivable environment in practice. So we've already skipped across the different layers of SAP to expose this information. And from there, I might say, well, let me have a look at the sales that are associated with that customer for the given year. So I can fire up a query there, and I'm now starting to see information which is sales-centric information. Coming across, I can see the sales document numbers, the date on which it was created, this name of person, perhaps that's a salesperson or whatever, you know, based on the information we've got in here, and so on and so forth. We can run down and start to see all that information. So what I'm trying to show you here is the ability to go from a very high level within on the surface of Excel through to a traditional account balances and journals, and then beyond that, in any direction that you choose, assuming you've got the queries in place there, to go really down to a very low level of detail in terms of the actual records that generated that overall balance in the GL in the first place. And in fact, we do have customers, not necessarily on the sales side, but certainly people who are looking at maybe a similar sort of drill down capability on purchases, we do have customers who actually drill down to into document imaging systems and actually generate a copy of an electronic copy of an invoice on screen, so you can get down to the actual source document itself should you want to do that by simply layering these queries and attaching them within our product into this layer of hierarchical layer of queries as I've shown you here. Just while I'm on the screen, before I forget, we've started to produce a fair number of records here. There's, I don't know, there's 33 records actually here, which is not a massive amount, but enough for me to look at this and think, well, quite a lot of data in tabular format there, and I've got to starting to get to a situation where I'm trying to see the wood for the trees, as it were. So what I want to do is maybe reorganize this data a little bit, and I could do that by simply sorting things in ascending or descending order, any of these fields on here, or I can filter information. So if I only wanted to see, and if I assume that one of those, that name of person field is a salesperson perhaps, then I can see just the records associated with Gallagher. Or if I wanted, I could actually reorganize this grid a bit like a pivot table in Excel. I can pick up that value, I can put this into this gray area at the top here, and you can see now that I've resequenced this grid, and I can start to see that information broken down on the basis of salesperson. So in other words, we have Gallagher selling these, generating these transactions for that customer to that account balance, which was on the surface of Excel. So all done on an ad hoc basis. That's really the key, and all real time. Grabbing information out of SAP from there. Put that back, and I can obviously then resort this in different ways and so on and so forth. So any of those are available to me. And we do find actually this drill down capability is really the feedback I get from the user base in my role here as the person who looks after the client services side of the business. This ability to be able to drill down into these ever-increasing levels of granularity on an ad hoc basis, particularly at month end, to reconcile, validate, verify numbers that are appearing on the source of those reports, very, very appealing to the end user community, or sitting in Excel and want to do all of this within Excel. Again, that's the key to this. I haven't had to come out of Excel, open SAP, do some drill downs in there or whatever I might need to do, some inquiries in there, then come back to my report. I'm really doing this all interactively within this one Excel session. So that's drill down. Let's just, hopefully that was clear. Let's just take a look at a bit more detail, just step back and take a look at how we actually got this report onto the surface of Excel in the first place. Now we looked at this number and we analysed this sales revenue number in some detail, but how do we know that that should be what it is? How do I work that, arrive at that number on the surface of Excel? Well, let me just, I've got some grouping and outlining here. Let me just open that up for you. And if I just highlight this number, and if I can just draw your attention up to the formula bar within Excel, you'll see here that really what's driving that is just a formula. And now it's a new formula that's been introduced into the Excel environment. It's part of our function calls that we add when we install the product. And this particular function is called a GXL. It's retrieving general ledger balances. But it is just an Excel formula. And what this is doing is it's saying, okay, well, I need to reach back into SAP and retrieve some data. And the precise piece of data that it's going to return in this instance is determined by these parameters that I've applied onto the surface of my Excel window here, and that I've put into the formula, as you can see here. So what we're looking at is just simply passing in accounting information here in order to push data back onto the surface of Excel. In this particular instance, I'm looking at the FI ledger, and we'll talk a little bit about the type of ledgers that we can go against in a moment or two. I'm saying, well, go and get me data from 2004. I want year-to-date information. Over here, we were looking at period information, so this cell will reference that. It's period 9. It's the chart of accounts INT, looking at US dollars. And you can see as we go down this, I won't go through all of these, but you can see here then we're looking at our chart of account where I'm saying for company I've used a wildcard, so go and get me all companies. For business areas, I'm actually saying go and get me all business areas, but in this particular case, I'm excluding business area 9900 for whatever reason. Maybe that's some kind of head office business area that we don't want to include in the operational report. And then across on the left-hand side here, you can see a reference to my account numbers. And in this, again, in this particular cell, I'm referencing an account range, which hopefully you can see there, which is from 800,000 to 800,999, which are, in my instance, all my sales account codes. So simply by building a formula, and again, we'll talk in a moment or two about how we build this formula. We've got a couple of tools that allow you to do that. We can drag information back from SAP into a specific cell. But the key to this is it's just Excel, really. At the end of the day, we're not asking you to learn a new reporting tool. We're simply saying if you know Excel and you know how to construct a formula, which 99.9% of the users of Excel around the world will be able to do very comfortably, then you can work with our product. We're really just utilizing everything there to get that data back. The trick, obviously, is that we're bringing that data. This bit is the piece that's bringing back that data directly from SAP. So, just moving along, you can see that was there. We've got a different cell reference there, and in this case, I'm bringing account 8900. In fact, if we just look at this just quickly, we'll just look at this, and if I maybe just reduce this to say, go and get me only account 800,000 in this case, we should then see that those numbers dynamically change because I've reduced the range of accounts that we're selecting in that case. So there you can see that in action really come together. Again, just to reiterate, it's just Excel. So what can we do with this? Well, we can do anything that you can within Excel. So if I wanted to maybe I've had a look at this report and I thought, well, actually what I'd really like is another column on the report which will show me not just the year-to-date actual, but maybe the prior month's year-to-date actual as well. How can I do that? Well, very simply, I could come in here using standard Excel functionality. I could copy that column. I can then insert those copied cells, and you'll see then that they've been added as you'd expect. Excel simply just copied that formula across, and it's handled all the relative and absolute addressing as you'd expect around the formula to look at the correct cells. And I'm bringing the same number back because I've got the same period. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say, well, let's just change that formula a little bit and say it's that reference minus 1. That'll get me an 8, and then it'll bring that number back to period 8 in there. So I've now got a relative field. I could maybe change the narrative on that to year-to-date actual minus 1, or whatever I want to call it, and that will do that. So 3 or 4 keystrokes, and I've automatically changed the way that that report looks and feels and helps. And of course, the drill down will just work straight away from there to provide that information. So it's a very, very straightforward application to work with, and hopefully you can see from that how it's relatively quick to actually get the application up and running and start writing reports, because you're using something that you're already familiar with. It's not an extensive training course. Now, just on the formula, you'll see here, it's a fairly standard formula in terms of its attributes. It's got a function and it's got some relative and absolute addressing. There are quite a number of different parameters associated with this that we need to pass in. We don't expect users to have to kind of remember this sequence and type this in manually. We have something called a formula assistant that will help you with that, or indeed a build a template wizard which will allow you to start to write a report from scratch. So what I thought we could do is just very quickly put together a report just to see, so that you can see the speed in which we can start to develop something. I'm not going to worry too much about formatting and all that, because that's really just Excel. There's nothing special about that. That's really just me utilizing all the attributes of Excel to make this look, the shape and the formatting of what we've got on here is what it is. So let me come through here, and we're going to create a brand new sheet within the book. Create one here, and I'm going to build a report. What I'll do is I'll just build a trend report. We'll maybe pull in periods 1 through 6 for a given year across a couple of account codes and rows, just to give you an idea. So what I'm going to do, come to the Build a Template wizard, and that opens that up here. These are the various formulas that are available to me within the product. The top 2 here are general ledger centric. These others are really associated with information that I might want to bring down onto the surface of Excel from areas outside of the general ledger. So if I had some summary sales reporting or purchasing or anything like that, these are the queries that we'd use for that. But it's the same principle. You can see it's just a wizard, just different attributes to the wizard that we need to provide. So let's concentrate on the GXL. Now in terms of ledgers, I'm going to put this into sheet 2, which is the new sheet we've got. Ledgers that we can reach back to. Here we've got a variety of different ledgers here, FI, CO, COR, PCA, COSA, or new GL. If a lot of you, are, I'm sure, are working on ECC6 and use the new GL, then all of the attributes of that, which is the integrated general ledger within SAP, that's available to you as well. We can also support special ledgers if you get involved in that. And over on the right-hand side here, if there are any idiosyncrasies with your particular general ledger application, then we can define what we call a custom profile within the application to allow you to get to that information as well. And we've done that for things like statistical key fields and things like that. We've adopted that approach to get information back to allow you to get information from there. I'm going to concentrate on FI just because it's the simplest environment for me to work in. So I'm going to use that, and also I've got some data in there. I'm going to get local currencies for 2006. I'm going to get period information. I could get quarters, year to date, life to dates if I was looking at balance sheets or arrays. I'm going to choose period 1. And just in here, this is the configuration of SAP that I want to run again. So just quickly on this, if you have multiple instances of SAP, you might have a QA, a development, a live environment, or maybe 2 or 3 live environments. You can configure within the application which one you actually want, what you're connecting to, and then determine here which one you want to choose in this one. So it's possible to actually deliver information onto the same Excel sheet, data from different SAP instances. I'm going to choose my option 2 here. And now that we're at the FI ledger, these are the attributes of FI. I'll just change this just very quickly actually to CO. You'll see then these attributes change because I'm required to fill in different parameters for that. So automatically that will reflect what's needed in order to fulfill the return of data from the area of SAP that we're looking at. So I'll go and get some actual data. What chart of accounts do I want to use? Well, I can't remember my chart, so I'm just going to do a lookup on that. So I'm going back to SAP. I can either type in something here and go and get the selection, or I can just cursor down. I'm going to go and get my INT chart. I don't need a plan because I'm looking at actual data here. I'll get some euros as my currency code. Maybe I'll go for all companies, so I'm going to wildcard that, and go and get my 80 series account codes for all business areas. And that's me pretty much done in terms of the setup, the initial setup of this particular report that I want. I can decide where this information resides on the Excel sheet, whether I want it as a column definition or as a row. All that's really doing is setting the attributes, the absolute and relative addressing around that cell address for me. Insert that in, and you can see that's now generated my formula and drop that number directly into the spreadsheet. And as soon as I'm at that point, then I can say, well, okay, let's copy that. Let's move this across, paste that in. So I've now got 6 columns of data. As you can see, it's all period 1 because that's obviously what we copied across. It was an absolute value. So I'm just going to change that slightly now, make that a general, and say that that cell is equal to that cell plus 1. Simple Excel. Copy that across. Then I've got my 6th period. You can see the data's changed there. It's my 80 series account, so maybe now I'll just copy that down twice perhaps, and paste that in, paste that through there. Go and get my 89 series account. Different numbers come through, and maybe this is a specific account in there, 42. And go and get that. I've got anything wrong. That's better. So that might be my sales. Now I'm typing a value in here because I've just created a sort of a generic collection of accounts, and similarly there, that might be cost of sales. And I could, from here, because this is a specific account number, I could use another formula to go and get that particular description of that account from SAP directly without me typing it in. I'm not going to worry too much about that. We're running out of time in terms of what we can show you there, but take it as read that you can go and get those values from Excel. Excel from there. And then finally, if I wanted on here, create a general, maybe I want to add those columns up, get a net value from there, drag that across, and then sort of format that according to however I want to format it. So maybe make that bold and so on and so forth, just as you would expect within Excel. As you saw before, I've got my report put together now. As you saw before, if I wanted to drill down, then I can drill down on that information directly from there. So it's all coming straight out of the box there. And of course, because this is Excel, whilst I've built a rows and columns report, a fairly traditional rows and columns report, because this is a cell-based application in this sense, there's nothing to stop me saying, well, actually, I want that number there, and maybe I want that number down here for whatever reason. I don't think of one at the moment, but for whatever reason I want those values there, then I can do that. And if I change then my accounting period, then those numbers will automatically change because they're simply reflecting where those attributes were. Excel's worked that out. It knows where I needed to go for those attributes, and will simply just follow the standard rules of Excel. Which means that if you were setting up a report, maybe like a key performance indicators report, where you said, well, I've got maybe key profit information, P&L information up here, maybe I've got some balance sheet over here, and maybe I've got some cash flow down here. You can do that very easily with the product because we're not using a traditional rows and columns approach. We're actually using a cell-based approach, and it can mean that that information in that cell could be completely different to the information in the cell adjoining it or below it or whatever you want. Simple as that, really. That's building a report. Hopefully that gives you a clue to how we can do that. In terms of other styles of report that we've got on here, let me just run through. I've got here, just to give you a flavor, here's a general and administrative expenses analysis. This was using the CO ledger, just breaking that, showing time down the side, and then some key accounts across the top with a graph. Graphs obviously Excel-based. The new GL, that was a balance sheet based on the integrated ledger, the new GL within ECC6. This looking at internal orders. And then I just produced a report here which is actually moving outside of the general ledger. Again, I'm conscious of time, so I'll just quickly talk to this. Same approach, we've got information, we're generating a value onto a cell within Excel here, using a slightly different formula here. And what this is doing is running a formula which is saying, well, run one of the queries that you might have built within the query designer piece in the Platinum version of the product, and bring that information back onto the surface of Excel. That query is going out to different tables, tables that you've decided to go and retrieve information from in the query that you've built in the query designer, and simply bringing it back onto Excel. So what we're saying here is that not only can you use the queries for drilling down, as we did in the first instance on the income statement where we drilled through to sales information at detail level, I can also summarize that information and return it onto the surface of Excel in the same way that we did the general ledger. Same approach to bringing that data back. Equally, we can drill down on that data. So from here, 1057, if I go and get that, you can see now that I'm starting to get into that information that we looked at earlier, and I'm producing that information. So really, any area of SAP that you want to report on and that's available to you, you can start to utilize using a combination of the gold and the platinum version of the product. That's showing that. I've also got purchasing information coming over here. You can see it's the same approach, just a slightly different query name that we've exposed to allow the end user to look at, and passing in parameters as we did before, a range, a purchase group of some sort, and then bringing the value down from there. Just on this piece here, this is a bit of a Excel Office 2013 coming into play. I've used one of the, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but within Office 2013 you've got apps that you can bring through. This is a Bing map that you can introduce into the Excel environment now, and what that's doing is actually then plotting on the basis of this information up here the instance of that, so I can start to see that Paris there was the 2709 or 2706, which is that value there. So, you know, increasingly within the Excel environment now, you've got this ability to present information graphically, pictorially, and so on and so forth. So, you know, becoming more and more of a a BI type environment within, actually sitting within Excel here. That's really a very sweeping look through just some examples of reports that we've got. In terms of how you might, just finally, you distribute this information. If we go back to this income statement here, just quickly, this report was running for these business areas, or a group of business areas, in fact, all of them apart from that 9900. And that's fine, that gives me that summary information. But what if I wanted to run this report, delete that row here, what if I wanted to run that report for all my business areas, and maybe there's 50 of those, or 20, or whatever it might be? Well, I could change that parameter, and Spreadsheet Server would go back, grab the data, and retrieve it, and show it me on this report here, and then I could change it again to the next business area, and so on and so forth, and it would get the data, and I could save that Excel sheet, which is fine, but that's a bit labor intensive. We don't really want to sit here and do that for 50 different reports. What I want is a way of automating that process and perhaps delivering that information once I've got it out to that recipient, or maybe the the manager of that business area or cost center or whatever it might be. How can I do that? Well, what we can do is we can use a module that sits within Spreadsheet Server called Distribution Manager. And there are some ribbon functions here that allow, not that one, sorry, those three there, that allow us to manage that. And what we basically do, we still work this within Excel, but what we basically do is we create a sheet within a workbook where we can provide the attributes for what we actually want to distribute and how and the method of distribution. Let's just go through a quick example. It's easier to show than for me to describe here. Just bear in mind that we're looking at cell E12 for a moment there, which is where I'm storing my business area value. Let's bear that in mind. Come to my distribution sheet. Here's a distribution. Let's just have a look at the top one. And here's a specification that I've already got in this sheet. So I've created one before we came online here. But to create one, we'd just come in and generate a new one. But I'm going to maintain this from here. So let me just open this up to show you the attributes of what we're doing here. So here's the wizard, if you like, that's behind this specification line that I've got sitting in Excel. What do I want to do? Well, I want to create a workbook, and I can either choose to email it to a recipient, to file save it, or indeed if I wanted to print it, then I could do that as well. I'm choosing to file save this particular report when I've done it. I'm going to create a business unit 1000. That's really what I want to do. So I'm going to, instead of all of those business units, make it specific to business unit 1000. When I've created my workbook, done my bit, I want to store it in that particular folder on my C drive. Clearly, in a production environment, that will be on a network. So that's the first thing. How do I want to save it, and in what fashion do I want to save it? As Excel, maybe as HTML, maybe as PDF, and we can also now save it as a Word document as well. Second section here is, well, given that I'm going to create this book, what cells do I need to change on one of these or many of these reports to make it pertinent and relevant to business unit 1000? So what I'm actually doing here is I've said, well, go and look in the workbook, choose the income FI statement, and now in that cell, E12, which we just looked at the moment, instead of it being */9999, make it absolutely 1000. So in other words, it will know to go and get data for 1000. And I could add another parameter in here which might change the period or the year and so on and so forth. So I can have many of these changes to make it specific to what I want to generate up here. So that's the first thing. What are we changing? Then I'm saying in this section here, well, what do I want to send to this user? Here's a list of all my reports within this workbook. Well, actually, the purpose of this distribution, I only want to send them the income FI sheet. I'm not going to bother them with all of the other sheets in the book. I'm just sending that one out. And then finally down at the bottom here, kind of a key element really, what do I want to do with the global software formulas when I actually create this workbook? Now, if you can imagine, you might have a series of users out there, some of who are using Spreadsheet Server and some who are not. If I send this report out as it stands to a Spreadsheet Server user, that'll be fine because it'll interpret those GXL formulas and all of that just fine. But if I sent it to somebody who hasn't got our add-in, loaded, then that workbook that I create simply won't understand what those GXL formulas are because that user hasn't got that function there. So what I might want to do, if this is a user who hasn't got Spreadsheet Server, is convert my global software formulas into values. That's exactly what I'm doing here. I can convert all formulas or I can say no formulas. So on a line-by-line basis, in terms of my distribution, I can control the manner in which that workbook's going to get created. And then I simply push that out to the workbook, and it creates this line here. And what I've done then, you can see it's got all of the attributes that we wanted there, amongst other things. I've just copied that down. And then I've said, well, actually, for the next line of my distribution, make it workbook 2000 and change that cell to 2000 there rather than 1000. And in this case, I've actually said don't convert it, so leave the formulas intact. Still create it as an Excel. And then finally then, in the bottom there, I've actually created a Word document. So we can integrate with Word in this way, and I'll maybe just show you that. I think we've got a complete version of that, so we'll show that as that comes through there. So to run this, well, let me just run one. I'll run them both, actually. Let's just run them very quickly. I wanted now to run my distribution. In other words, take that income sheet, create me a report for Business Unit 1000, and create me one for 2000, store them in this workbook folder, or email them to somebody as an attachment, whatever I've decided to do. Get that process going automatically so I can just let it run. So we'll do that now. We'll distribute selected. That will then fire off in the background there. It's creating now, running through, it's looking at the attributes, saying, okay, go and get me data 1000, reaches back to SAP, grabs all that data, pours it into that income worksheet, creates me a copy of that that's pertinent to the that business unit, and saves the file. And that's done. If I now come out here and look at that folder, we look in SAP, in other, you can see here these are the two workbooks that I've just created a moment ago. So the first one, if I open that up, you can see here now, I should have actually hidden my grouping in outlining. I forgot to do that, so sorry about that. But here, the important thing here, that number is now generated for Business Unit 1000. It's got me the value, and it's actually converted that value into a formula because I've assumed that this person hasn't got Spreadsheet Server. On the other hand, come back here, and I open this one up. There we go, sorry. That's brought that through, and you can see now my values in there. I didn't actually have any sales information for that particular one, but my value has now come through with the formula intact. So this person who has got Spreadsheet Server could now start to use the drill down capability that we had within the product to go and analyze that data in more detail. And just finally, just while I'm here, I didn't run this one. This is one I did yesterday just to check. But we can also generate this information out into a Word document. So again, if you've got some, a management pack where you've got some narrative and you want to analyze information and actually present it in a way that's not just an Excel spreadsheet, I'll just open that up. This is the type of output. It's a very brief example. This is the type of output that you can generate. So we've got a Word document here. I've brought some income statement highlights in. So what this is doing is it's actually now brought into this by linking to that Excel workbook the sales value that I wanted, the profit value that I wanted, and then also brought a graph in as well into that different book. So this is just a Word document now that's been brought together. So this could well serve as kind of the introduction or the notes to a management pack, which might then be supported by the underlying Excel sheet. This is a new addition to our application actually that I don't think I've actually seen. In fact, it's about a week old, so which is why I'm working with it at the moment. But it's an interesting new introduction to the distribution manager piece. Okay, that was hopefully. I apologise. We ran through a lot of information there in a fairly short space of time. But what I wanted to do was try and give you a flavour for as much information as we could there. Just to show you the power of the application. I guess just to summarize, what we're looking at here is an application that will allow you to first of all go real-time and direct against your underlying SAP applications. There's no involved complicated data cubes or data warehouse that needs to be built to utilize the application, which means we can get a very rapid deployment up and running very, very quickly, particularly on the general ledger side where it's pre-configured to reach out to the relevant tables. So that can be, we could have starting to produce this type of information really on the first day of install, pretty much, to get this. Clearly, the style and reporting that you want will depend on the complexity of your formatting and so on and so forth. But to start to pull numbers back, as I did on that fairly simple sheet that was produced here, wherever it was, that one, very, very quick to be able to do that. So utilizing everything that's good about Excel, which is its personal productivity tools, its formatting and all of that, and getting away from the things that Excel is not so good at, which is where it quite often gets used as a database, where a lot of information is being sort of dumped down into thousands and thousands of rows on some feeder sheet in the background here, and then to get the reports looking as they should, we've got people are using VLOOKUPs and all of that sort of thing. Excel not really great at doing that sort of thing. If anything changes, the links break, and it's just an inefficient way. It was never meant to be a database. What we're doing here is taking all that out of there and allowing you to go direct back to the source, which is obviously secure data, and bring the truth back onto the worksheet.